Welcome! Today we will be taking a look at my Final Fantasy collection. I've been an avid fan of the series over the years, and as a European, it hasn't always been that easy to obtain some of the games, but luckily there's internet now, so I got my hands on a lot of these games. So, let's take a look. First off, I've got the original version of Final Fantasy 1 on the Famicom. To go with that, I've also got Final Fantasy 2 and Final Fantasy 3. Moving on to the Super Famicom, I have got Final Fantasy 4, Final Fantasy 5, and Final Fantasy 6. I have got the original Nintendo version of 1, and I've got Final Fantasy 3 for the Super Nintendo. I've also got the PlayStation remakes, Origins 1 and 2, Anthology 4 and 5, Just 6 with a Final Fantasy X demo. I've got the American versions of Chronicles, which is 4 and Chrono Trigger, Anthology of which is 5 and 6. I've got the Japanese remakes, 4, 5 and 6 all in one. I've got the Game Boy Advance versions 1 and 2 Dawn of Souls, 4, 5 and 6. I've got the Wonder Swan color versions of 1, 2 and 4, and I've also got PSP remake of 1, 2 and the DS remakes of 3 and 4. So those were the first 6 games in the series. Let's continue on with Final Fantasy 7, Final Fantasy 8, Final Fantasy 9, Final Fantasy 7 the European version, Final Fantasy 8 the European version, and Final Fantasy 9 the European version. I've got the bonus disc for Final Fantasy 7 International version, the European version of Final Fantasy X, Final Fantasy X-2, and Final Fantasy 12. I've got the collector's edition of Final Fantasy 12. I've got Final Fantasy 11 on the PC. I've got Final Fantasy 11 Wings of the Goddess on 360. I've got the limited edition Crisis Core, only released in Europe. Dirge of Cerberus, Advent Children limited edition, Advent Children normal DVD, the UMD, and this I got last week, the Blu-ray with the Final Fantasy 13 demo, awesome demo. Spirits Within, it's the Dutch limited edition, the UMD of Spirits Within, and the anime series Final Fantasy Unlimited. Now let's move on to the spin-offs. Mystic Quest, the Japanese version, the European version of Mystic Quest, Final Fantasy Adventure for the Game Boy, which spawned the Mana series with Secret of Mana, Japanese one, Secret of Mana, European, Legend of Mana, Sword of Mana, Children of Mana, and Heroes of Mana. Moving on to the Saga series, Final Fantasy Legend, Legend 2, and Legend 3. Romancing Saga, the Japanese version, Romancing Saga 2, and Romancing Saga 3 with some amazing box art, hand drawn, awesome. Saga Frontier, Saga Frontier 2, the port of Romancing Saga, and Unlimited Saga. Moving on to the more direct Final Fantasy spin-offs. Final Fantasy Tactics, Final Fantasy Tactics Advance, Tactics A2, Final Fantasy Tactics on the PSP. I've got Final Fantasy XII Revenant Wings for the DS, the GameCube version of Crystal Chronicles. Comes with a link cable for your GBA SP or your normal GBA. Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles Ring of Fates, the Chocobo series, Chocobo Dungeon 1, the Japanese version, Chocobo Dungeon 2, Chocobo Racing, Chocobo Stallion. This is like the Final Fantasy VII, where you have to race your Chocobos. Final Fantasy Fables, Chocobo Tales. Final Fantasy Fables, Chocobo Dungeon. So those are the main games. I've got some more stuff. I've got a lot of strategy guides, mostly the European versions, and I've got some Play Arch figures, Cloud, Sephiroth, Squall, stuff like that. But let's on to the main part of this video, which are my Final Fantasy limited edition consoles. Let's begin. I have got Final Fantasy 1 Wonder Swan Color, only released in Japan. And to go with that one, I've also got 2. Funny little system, fun hand-on, competition for the Game Boy, but never really caught on in Japan. Final Fantasy 4 Micro, awesome. I've got Final Fantasy 12 Revenant Wings Japanese limited edition, which is over here. I believe this is the best of the 3, maybe 4 Final Fantasy released DS's. The best one I don't have. I believe the DS Light of the World and With You is the best looking one out there. I don't have it, so maybe some other time. Crisis Core limited edition, the European one, not the Japanese one. Not really Final Fantasy, but of course a spin-off, Kingdom Hearts, GBA SP, Chain of Memories. I've got a Pocket Station. It's not really Final Fantasy, but you could only play one game in Europe with this, and that is Final Fantasy VIII. And last but not least, one of my proudest items is the big box PC version of Final Fantasy VIII. I'm a big fan of 8. Sure, it's not the best of the best, but personally this is the one that really got me into Final Fantasy. I love the series, and this is a nice object to have. A funny little thing is that in Europe this game got released by Eidos, and we all know Square has both Eidos, so maybe they got a little nostalgic. Let's hope they will release some great games. So that was my Final Fantasy collection. As I mentioned, I got a lot more strategy guides and figures. I also got a lot more Square games and a lot more RPGs, stuff like Kingdom Hearts, Chrono Trigger, stuff like that, which unfortunately due to time restrictions I can't show. So a shout out to everybody that's been watching, and of course all the other people who have uploaded their Final Fantasy collection. Great videos to watch, help my collection grow. Hope all your collections will grow over the years, and thank you for uploading, thank you for watching, and I will be back next time with some more collection videos and hopefully some more review videos where I will discuss or give my impressions on some RPGs. So thank you for watching again, see you later, Arrow out.